Pat McAfee went off again. And this time with Showtime's All the Smoke podcast, which is with Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson from the NBA. He called out Norby Williamson. We know that. That's chronicled. That was certainly covered top to bottom. He called him out for being a rat. But what he doesn't call him is his boss.
We don't have to even speak names, but you spoke a name and called out someone a suit. I mean, the courage to do that, and you got a lot of respect. You already had respect, but even more respect for doing that. Has there been any backlash, any conversation? Because like you said, there is a give and take and a tug between what people hung their hats on for years and made a lot of money and what is coming and what it's going to be.
I don't know. I don't know if there was any conversations that happened behind, obviously. So, I thought that was a warning shot to that guy. I didn't even think that was
a direct hit.
Yeah, because I'm the executive producer of my show. I report directly to Jimmy and Bob. So I'm not really viewing anybody as, I saw everybody Pat calls out his boss. I'm going to boss. What are we, what are we, Jim Pitaro? Are we talking Jimmy Pitaro or Bob Iger? Is that who we're talking about? Because those are people that could technically be described as my boss. And Burke Magnus as well, and I have a great relationship with him. But I think even Burke would say we have a good we are talking like this as opposed to like this. And so that was just a warning shot to, I thought, a person that was, at the same, which is hilarious because he's the former president of the place. I guess a lot of people had a lot of fear of him. I did not.
Right.
I do not have, that guy left me sitting in his office for 45 minutes, no-showed me when I was supposed to have a meeting with him, right? When 5 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever.
No-showed you.
No-showed, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so
And you remember that.
What's that?
And you remember that.
This thing's an elephant brain,
There
buddy.
you go.
Yeah. I am. Yeah, I got everybody's. Yeah. And he also banned all my friends from coming on my show. So
Really?
there was a ban of ESPN talent on my show on YouTube that came directly from him, which so much so that I started a hashtag ESPN stinks the day that everybody got banned from my show.
All the Smoke podcast with Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes. Chad, one thing comes to mind here for me, listening to McAfee, again, just double down, triple down, whatever you want to say. I think ESPN has not addressed this internally at all.
You think it just went silent?
Yeah. I mean, it seems like they just let McAfee do his thing. He then says that, hey, we're just going to not have Aaron Rodgers on for the rest of the playoffs, and then he's on the next day, and then we don't see him again. He doesn't address Norby Williamson at all since then, and I think they just thought it would go away. It's still there. Whatever the issues with the rat and leaking false ratings and numbers, all of that is still on the surface level an issue. And behind the scenes, it's more than just an issue. This is something that he's going to continue to point to and discuss and call out because he said, hey, this was just a warning shot, meaning don't F with me.
I'm curious how Norby Williamson still has a job at this point, because Norby Williamson getting called out again by Pat McAfee as basically someone who does nothing but causes trouble for him and has such disrespect for Pat McAfee that before he was even at ESPN, he made him sit for 45 minutes and wouldn't meet with him, and also does not have the courage or backbone to pick up the phone and call McAfee after he calls him a rat on his show. And I'm going with your idea, Hutton, that no one did anything at ESPN.
I just get the sense that
one handled it.
There's still vitriol there.
They just went quiet, and then he doesn't say anything to him. It's just...
I mean, he said we're at war was another thing he laid into on a 5-minute clip.
It's so soft-spined of Williamson. First off, treat people with respect. I don't care what title you have. I don't care what label you have. I don't care what power you think you have. Treat people with common human decency. And if you set up a meeting, meet. And then if not, give a good reason why you couldn't and apologize for having to move the meeting. And Norby Williamson didn't do that. That's one thing that set Pat McAfee off. The other thing that set Pat McAfee off is the fact that he feels like he's being sabotaged both before he was at ESPN and after. Before, because Norby Williamson, playing the little puppeteer that he is, decided, well, here's the power that I have. I can demand ESPN talent not appear on Pat McAfee's show on YouTube. So then McAfee says he started getting rid of my friends on my show. We've had that game played before too.
Sure.
Hardman.
Yep.
It's a common game played by middling executives all over America.
And very common with
can't,
ESPN.
Yeah, I'm not on a camera. I'm not speaking into a microphone. But what I can do is mess with your guest list if you leave one company and go to another. That's the type of game they play. But hosts remember that. On-air talent remembers those things. So that's 2 now for McAfee. 3 is he gets there. They don't exactly roll out the red carpet for him with Williamson, and Williamson continues to F with him on the show, continues to leak reports about bad ratings or about different things going on, and McAfee's well-connected enough. He just called Jimmy Pitaro, the ESPN CEO, Jim Pitaro. That shows you how well-connected he is at ESPN. Bob, he refers to Bob Iger, Disney CEO.
Well, and Pitaro's the one that he called and got Matt Hasselbeck and Dan Orlovsky. Those are the 2 specifics that could not come on his show to rectify the situation, is what he said.
Yeah.
And how about this quote? So, he joined and he took the place of SportsCenter at noon. And that was Norby Williamson's show. He ran SportsCenter. And so the quotes here from McAfee in regards to all of that is he's saying that we're at war. Immediately this guy, it's like this guy sucks. This guy's ruining ESPN. It's not coming from people outside ESPN. It's coming from people within ESPN. And I did not expect that at all. So I was like, I'm at war. That's what we're doing. We're at war. That's what he also said on this podcast.
Again, how does Norby Williamson still have a job? Why is Norby Williamson so important to the company that they don't move on? You're going to allow a war to happen with a guy, by the way, that so far, because we have not heard from him, I have to assume is clearly in the wrong based on all accounts from McAfee. McAfee is running the ledger up of crimes committed by Norby Williamson to him as a human. Made him sit for 45 minutes before a meeting. McAfee remembered that. Screwed with his guest list. Has tried to undermine him since coming to ESPN and trying to have a successful property for ESPN. These are just strikes against Norby Williamson. Is Norby Williamson going to get his side of the story out? We know that he has friends in the media, that he could leak that side of the story if one exists. Or are we going to continue to play this shadow war between, it's not even a cold war, it's a very hot war between McAfee and Norby Williamson, while Norby Williamson continues to get to be in the executive suite and have his corner office at ESPN. It's a wild situation.
Yeah. And
again, that we don't hear from him, and he just continues to go about his daily business.
And I think that's just par for the course here. Again, I don't think they've addressed it. And I'll also say, he said that when he called out Williamson earlier this year, he said that roughly 40 former and current ESPN employees reached out to him and thanked him for doing so. So this is not just a McAfee issue. And final thought on where we go from here. I would love to know what Stephen A. Smith thinks of this. Because guess whose contract is coming up? Guess who wants to be the highest paid employee at ESPN? Stephen A. And there are not many voices, not many faces on the network where you're like, yeah, he qualifies. Stephen A. does. And, I mean, you have Pat McAfee saying, I don't have a MFing boss. And Stephen A. is already saying he wants to be the highest paid and a big bump in pay.
And that's
Get
his
ready
guy.
for that. Well,
right? Norby Williamson originally worked on his show and originally hired Stephen A. Smith. So if we're looking for alliances, I feel like Stephen A. Smith initially came out in defense of Norby Williamson when all this happened. Because I think they're joined at the hip in some way.
Well, yeah, maybe. So with the SportsCenter shows and that.
Yeah.
But also, Stephen A. was discussing McAfee, how they're opposites. But I'm thinking about that too, Chad. The way Stephen A. made his name on ESPN was he was going to be loud and boisterous. He was going to be prepared. He was going to know the proper sources. He was going to be informed. I've never thought that anything but that with him. But he was going to grab attention by yelling, right? By being the show, entertaining. And that's exactly what McAfee's doing. All of this. And that's how he's done it through the YouTube aspect, much like Stephen A. did it through coming from newspaper columnist to radio and then now what he became on TV. They're very similar despite being different.
Yeah, I'm confused by the situation because I don't understand the value of Norby Williamson at this point in his career if McAfee is calling him a rat and no one is rushing to his defense. And then McAfee comes back and says upwards of 30 ESPN talent. 40?
Yeah, but he clearly
came back and thanked me for it.
He clearly has value because he's been there since 2005 and he has been overseeing all SportsCenter production since 2005. That's a long time.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's the last year that
I've
Duke's fans stormed the court.
I don't know because I've never worked at ESPN.
Right.
But I'm simply asking the question. I'm looking at the evidence here. This is a trial. I'm looking at the evidence. Pat McAfee has mounted all this evidence against Norby Williamson. Norby Williamson has not spoken, has not leaked his side of the story to a media outlet, has not said a word.
Which is exactly what
40
ESPN
other
wants.
ESPN talent comes to McAfee, according to him, thanks him.
But they're
for
not
calling
speaking publicly
out
either.
The rat Norby Williamson, probably because most of them aren't Pat McAfee and they want to keep their job.
Yeah.
And they're afraid they'd lose it if they went out. But my point being, what is his value if that's the case? Why is he still there? I want someone to explain that. I don't know. I'm simply asking questions. What is his value and why won't someone come out and explain that? Because longevity doesn't necessarily mean you're still great at your job.
Well, also, the other weird part is the day or two after the original spat, the original feud, he's posing for photos at the college football playoff.
With Burke Magnus.
Yeah. That was in Indianapolis, right?
And then he came back
that was the Big Ten championship game.
Then he came back and basically said, I should not have done that.
Yeah, but
remember on Monday he said, I didn't want to bring other people into it.
He didn't want to drag them into it.
That was our buddy Burke Magnus. We thought it'd be funny to pose on the field for a picture. And I'm sure he's thinking, take it down so it doesn't look like I'm taking sides against him.
Chad, speaking of the college football playoff, here we go. We're headed to a 12-team playoff. And headlines today are pointing to a 14-team playoff with the SEC and the Big Ten getting a guaranteed automatic 3 bids for each conference as they continue to talk expansion before we've even expanded.
Can we just pump the brakes? I mean, we have not let the 12-team playoff not even simmer. We haven't dropped the 12-team playoff into the pot to cook yet. We have not witnessed one 12-team playoff. We've not seen if it advances the product and elevates it or if it dilutes it. Haven't seen any of it. And we got to get so far out ahead of it. We got, guys, $1.3 billion a year is what ESPN might pay us in our next contract, so we need to get more games involved there. We got to go ahead and start looking at more games. We got to start looking at ways to make sure the SEC and the Big Ten are protected and they get more than the other conferences. Let's let this season play out. Let's just at least do that. Okay, we had a whole discussion earlier this week on not messing with greatness. And we did it in regards to the NCAA basketball tournament, which to me is the perfect sporting event. It pisses me off every March if my team gets put out when I don't think they should, but it's righteous. It's the way it should be. Basketball is a tournament sport, and you mess up in one game, your season can be over. It is heartbreaking, but it's what makes that tournament beautiful, and it's what makes millions of Americans tune in, especially that Thursday and Friday, to open the NCAA tournament. It's a beautiful, beautiful sporting event. Don't mess with it. We don't need more teams. We don't need more teams because you think you need more money, even though you're already making piles of money. Gordon Gekko said greed is good in Wall Street. This is one where I don't think it's good. It's not good for the totality of the sport. It isn't. It does not help your argument with prospective college athletes and current college athletes that are trying to make more money because you're unwilling to let a little bit of money or a little bit more down the road. You're going to do anything you can to get that money, even if it jeopardizes the good of the sport. SEC and Big Ten, I get it. You're the most powerful. You're going to break away. You're going to lead whatever happens. But you taking a bigger piece of the pie is really not what's best for all of college football. What's best is for those other conferences to get better. They're never going to do that. They're going to fall away. if we continue to do more and more of this. I'm not blaming the SEC and Big Ten for doing that, by the way. I'm just giving you reality. Because the reality is the NFL is the top sport in all of the land. And the biggest reason they are is because they have a sense of community within that league, that not one team is bigger or better than the other. And those 32 teams stick together. And because of that, they have the best contract situations with their players in all of sports. More people watch it. More people attend it. It is the most profitable, best sport in America because they look out for everything. I don't think you're looking out for everything when you're constantly keeping one eye on making a little bit more money down the road. Can we please press pause and just watch this first playoff play out before we start adding teams to it?
I think they're already adding because they all along the plan is 16. And I think this is ESPN driven as much as it is SEC and Big Ten. SEC, of course, going into a new agreement with ESPN. Also, Chad, think about it from the inventory aspect of what ESPN has agreed to. I don't know if they've officially signed the deal, but they've agreed to a 6-year extension for the college football playoff. And a part of this, reportedly, is they can now sell off inventory to other networks or streaming services, individual games. This adds more inventory to their pot while keeping the premium brands at a high level within that pot with the guaranteed 3 automatic bids for each conference. But also, if you're expanding, everyone's just going to fall in line with whatever these two. I think this has been discussed behind the scenes, and they're trying to get the money behind it because they weren't voting it through this year. They voted through the 12 team, and there was pushback initially. This was back in August. And within, 8 months, all of a sudden everybody's on board, unanimous vote that they're expanding. Not just expanding, but they're going to the 12-team playoff with the idea that we're going to 16.
I'm uncomfortable with an NCAA network, and that's what ESPN would become here.
Well, they already are.
They're the college football home, but if we're now talking about moving on from they are a network paying money to partner with you to show your games to we are now using them as a distribution service where they can take our product and resell it on the open market to Fox or whoever else.
Well, see, that's where the Big Ten comes in with their TV agreement.
They're the NFL network of the NCAA.
But they have it. They own all the other championships, except for which one? There's one that the college basketball tournament.
I know they do, but I'm saying they air it right now. Now we're moving on from them not just airing it, but then repackaging it and selling it as their own independent company to someone else.
But that's exactly what they want to do when they branch off.
Yeah, I don't look.
They want to become the NFL where they have every network involved.
Yeah, call me an old stick in the mud here. I don't care what ESPN wants with college football. I don't. Like, if someone would make one decision to make less money and say, we're going to do what's good for the whole of the sport and what's good for the whole of our championship, and we might make a few million less this year, but this is how it should be done because it's what's best for the overall product. And in the end, we're going to see that it may make more money eventually by doing that. I would love for someone to make a decision like that. I just think everything being driven solely by money is not going to end well for one of these properties we continue to talk about.
Well, let's start with the NCAA. I mean, if you want leadership and someone to step up and do something, where are they?
Oh, of
course. Where is leadership?
They're the worst.
They're allowing everybody to come in and get their piece of the pie. And meanwhile, they're bothering, the University of Tennessee and the state of Tennessee and the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Yeah.
Instead of actually stepping up and getting something done. You've got this.
Well, they're the worst because they're hypocrites about it. But right? At least ESPN and Fox and networks aren't getting involved in NIL saying these kids should not make money or market themselves on the open market. They don't care.
Well, neither do the fans.
They just want the best television product. Right. When the NCAA is trying to live in both worlds, hey, let's expand the NCAA tournament so we can fatten our pockets.
Right.
While
they're going
also
to lose
saying
football.
You're not allowed to fatten your pockets by looking at different options for you before you go to college. That's wrong. That's hypocrisy. So, yes, the NCAA is on my list, too.
And the leadership of the two conferences that are running things. They have to. They have this alliance. They have this partnership. But now it's more than just the NIL. We're about to see the branch off, and this is setting everything up. Because you're going to have the teams involved, the networks that control the broadcast for said conferences are going to be involved here. And I think that whenever you actually have the partnerships between the networks come together, which we're already seeing, ESPN's already in a partnership with Fox. They're already in a partnership with Warner Brothers Discovery. So that makes sense that that's where those games could land. And that's all worked in the timeline of what this is being reported, the 14 team. I don't know why you just don't go ahead and say 16.
I don't know that there's any stopping the death of the Big 12 and the ACC, just like we saw the death of the Pac-12 and all of this. But if they sign into this agreement where they're going to take less teams than the SEC, and I mean, just right off the start, right? We're not talking about college football playoff rankings, nothing else. Right off the start, top three, top two for you. I think they're signing their own death warrant.
But what they're doing, though,
because by doing that, they're handing over all the power. It's probably inevitable regardless, but they're handing over all the power to Big Ten and SEC to where now it's going to eventually become, we're going to go ahead and negotiate these television contracts on our own, and we'll invite whoever we want from your conferences. We'll see if you want to play or not.
But if they don't, if they don't go along with it, they're dead. It's the death sentence versus a life sentence.
Yeah, they got to fight it. They got to at least have the appearance of fighting it.
They haven't even tried. If they tried, they voted it through. Brett Yormark was very vocal about taking over as the Big 12. He did great things last offseason. I haven't heard from him on this. And he was the third biggest voice in the conference realignment. But in terms of the money grab's also happening with the ACC and the Big 12 because they have to have the revenue share of the college football playoff. They're also going to benefit by the expansion because they'll get more of the pie with more games and more revenue coming in. That they also need the revenue, but they're not going to have the biggest chunk because the SEC and the Big Ten, they're saying, hey, you need to stay afloat. We can make that happen, but we're going to have more teams in. That's what they have to do, or they're done. They will be the Pac-12.
It's pretty pathetic for those conferences that we got to this point, honestly.
I'm with you,
it really is. I don't know that it had to happen either. I just don't. It all looks inevitable now with hindsight, and we can sit back and say, oh, this was always going to happen. But really, was it always going to happen? Did Texas and Oklahoma have to leave? Did the Pac-12 really have to implode? Did the ACC have to fall to this point right now where they're not even that relevant of a basketball conference? I don't think all those things had to happen. I believe college sports is at its best when there was a Power Five, and those Power Five conferences were functional, and you had legitimate rivalry between the conferences. There's no rivalry anymore, and I'm a little sick to my stomach to think about the Big Ten and SEC now being buddy-buddy, given how most of my life you're trained in the South to hate the Big Ten, and you're trained in the Midwest to hate the SEC, and now they're just going to sit on a podium together and announce the next TV contract all at once. I don't like it. I don't think the quality of the sport has taken a hit at all. I think it's as good or better than it's ever been when I watch the games on Saturday. But I don't like where everything is headed right now. I just don't.
Well, and
I love the NFL. I love college football. I love the differences between the two. And I fear the inevitability that it's just going to be the NFL.
Everything is and see, that's a great point because I think the one message that isn't being mentioned enough is when it comes to the NFL, I think the mark that is missed is, by and large, college football fans, they love college football because it's not the NFL.
Yes.
And in terms of leadership, you have, instead of conferences, instead of university presidents, instead of athletic directors and coaches, Nick Saban's even admitted he's not going to sit there and come up with a plan. He said that's for someone else. He names Greg Sankey as part of that. You have two voices in the room, and that's it. And the expansion happened because of poor leadership from Mark Emmert to the conference commissioners from the West Coast down to the ACC, right? And that has allowed the best leaders to take over. And those that are silent behind the scenes, everyone's like, Greg Sankey's fine with 14, and he's not going. He doesn't want to expand to 60. He keeps going and going and going. Meanwhile, you see the Big Ten expand to 20, but really they didn't want to expand past USC and UCLA. They wanted to have a trial year to see what was going to happen. And then you see Oregon and Washington come right on in. Those that are working behind the scenes, they're running job. And it's really two guys that are speaking on behalf of the most powerful presidents and chancellors, along with coaches and along with players. But that's the big difference. There's not a voice for the players at all in any of this discussion.
Well, there are two people aren't represented, players and fans. There's no voice for the fans either.
Well, the fans will voice based on the ratings, and that's why you're getting the billions upon billions that are being paid.
Yeah, and but the fans, I don't think that them going to a 40-team super conference is what's going to make the ratings better. I think it's the fans watch those teams regardless. I think even fans of those 40 super schools that we're talking about that are going to emerge victorious from all of this, all those fans would even say, the sport is better when the Pac-12 exists. The sport is better when the Big 12 was fun and offense was at a high level. The sport is better when the Big 10 and the SEC hate each other. The sport is better when the ACC isn't a joke. The fan gets no voice in any of this. And I'm one of them. I'm one of the thousands of people that grew up with college football a certain way that was different from the NFL and special in its own right. And it's going to become the NFL, and college football's powers that be would say, well, so what? What's the problem with that? It's the most profitable, powerful sports entity in our country. So what's wrong with that? And I would simply say, well, nothing if it's just about money for you 32 to 40 schools, because that's what they're all going to head to do anyways.
As a collective, Chad, this week's we've been more vocal about storming the court than pointing out anything that's been going on over the last 3 or 4 years.
I just think
they want to take. That's also an NFL way. Is
right.
You don't storm the field and you don't storm the court.
What they're doing though is eventually it's just taking something that was so uniquely American, which all of college sports very uniquely American, not a big thing anywhere else in the world, but something uniquely American that was special to so many, and they're completely changing it to a pro model that has been very successful for a long time, and I'm sure they're all going to make a lot of money, and these schools are going to be able to spend a lot of money on those top players, and the top players are going to be happy because they're going to make more money because they're just playing a certain amount of teams at that level. But I beg the question, is that really what's best for college football and what we know of college football? I would argue it's not, but I'm arguing this as a fan of college football, and I don't matter when it comes to that because I'm going to watch these teams regardless. So they got me. They've got my Nielsen rating. I'm going to watch games on Saturday, right? I mean, if that's the judge is the ratings, then okay, I'm guilty.
You know who
I'm
else
still going to watch it.
The NCAA, because they've stood aside for years.
Well,
and now they're just watching what happens.
Yeah, they're
just watching what happens.
They're close to being totally irrelevant.
Which is why they're trying to expand the tournament. Same thing, because they have control over that. Chad,
hey, how about this breaking news?
Okay.
Making sure this is a legit account.
Yeah, no, let's hear it.
It's on 3 Sports. It is a legit account. Caitlin Clark is foregoing her final year of eligibility to go to the WNBA draft.
Wow.
She's already announced it. Caitlin Clark declares for 2024 WNBA draft.
What's that? What's that
sad
contract
about
look like?
that.
What's that contract look like then?
Not as good as it would have been in Iowa.
I guess not, but
she's forfeiting money, I would assume.
Why would you go ahead and announce that?
Especially, I guess, I don't know. Guilty here. Sorry, I don't know all the rules of the WNBA draft and when they have to declare. They may have the draft in like 2 weeks, for all I know, and she had to declare now during the season.
Well, the average salary was what, $250,000 roughly?
I don't know how
last season?
I don't know how that works. She's making a lot more than that right now. And look, the idea is she's going to continue to make money in endorsements. So. Well, not the same, but she's going to make a lot in endorsements, whether she's Iowa or in
you stay partnered with them
in the WNBA. I hate it. I wish she was coming back to Iowa. She's way more entertaining, and it's a much better story, more fun story if she's playing women's college basketball, which has seen a huge surge in popularity because of her. And if it happens to be her and Angel Reese locked up again in the NCAA tournament at some point, we're all going to watch that. I'm certainly tuning in for that game.
Just her brand.
It's a good question. If anyone could help it, I think it is her.
Well, see, keep in mind the NBA pays through the WNBA. They're helping keep. What do you think they're paying?
They basically subsidize it.
Yeah. What are they paying to have her do this?
I don't know.
To head to the WNBA draft.
That's a good question.
And by the way, she's right on Pete Maravich's scoring record too.
Yeah, she's going to pass that.
They're coming up against Ohio State this weekend.
Yeah.
So she's 18 points shy. How fast will she do that? What's the over-under in Vegas for that? 18 points against Ohio State.
She'll make that before halftime, is my guess.
Maybe way before.
She'll have 6 threes before half. I hate that she's not coming back to Iowa.
Yeah,
I think that's a mistake on her part.
Well, what is that negotiation?
Just like I said, I am absolutely watching her in the NCAA tournament whenever she plays,
Yeah,
and especially if it's LSU. I will at the same time simultaneously say I will not watch her in the WNBA because I will not watch
painful.
any WNBA game. It's awful.
Yeah.
So I'm not tuning in for that product. I don't care. The Las Vegas Aces are like the one team that I know about right now because they've been very good. And I think Becky Hammon, who I once scrimmaged against in basketball practice back in the day when I was in college, is their coach. So I'm familiar with that team. And a guy with a bad haircut, Allen in Vegas owns it, right? The owner of the Raiders.
Oh, Davis.
Sorry, not Allen. Davis.
Yeah, you're
owns
right.
the team.
Yeah.
So that's how this concludes the segment of me unveiling all of my WNBA knowledge. Now I'll remember what team Caitlin Clark goes to. That's it.
your WNBA update.
Yes.
Caitlin Clark.
This is the OutKick Hot
Hey,
Mic
that's-
WNBA update.
That is the biggest update in WNBA. Is Caitlin Clark's foregoing the extra season to go to the WNBA draft?
If you're in the WNBA, this is like a national holiday that this has happened.
Chad, Mecole Hardman. The NFL wants to throw out the word integrity when we're out in Las Vegas, right?
Mm-hmm.
Big
on integrity.
They don't want anybody with even the assumption that anyone associated with the NFL, an employee of the league, is gambling. Do that, and the harsh penalties headed your way. Integrity of the game. You can't even get on an app in a state where it's legal if you're on the property of said football team, if you're a player. They'll pop you with a suspension. Perceived collusion and involvement on anything like that, they're harsh. Mecole Hardman, it was on the podcast recently where he is discussing the fact that he called the Chiefs, called the general manager, Veach, hit up his guy, Patrick Mahomes, and said, hey, come get me. While he was this past season, he was in New York. And this is through a podcast where he jumps on and says, he's with Ryan Clark. And he says, hey, I'm doing this. I hated it. He's going through all the reasons why he hated playing for the New York Jets. So Connor Hughes is at the Combine, and he has media availability with Joe Douglas, general manager for the New York Jets. And you better believe he's saying he's not thrilled with the fact that Hardman, who is a malcontent, is saying, hey, I contacted the Chiefs, told them to come get me. Well, that's tampering. And the Jets can and likely will ask the league to look into that. His former teammates see this, Chad, and fire off responses. The punter, Thomas Morstead, he's responding by saying, be careful about getting information from disgruntled employees. And Sauce Gardner posted this on social media. So we ain't going to talk about how our offensive game plan got leaked versus the Eagles, though?
Ooh, spicy. Sauce getting spicy, but then he deleted it.
Right. But not before reporters saw
someone
this.
got that screenshot.
So the players are saying he leaked the offensive game plan to a team or teams. And then Connor Hughes did some digging and reported the following. Yes, I'm told there was validated belief from the Jets that wide receiver Mecole Hardman, frustrated by the lack of usage, leaked game plans to the opposition, as implied by several players. He mentions Sauce Gardner is one of them. Not just the Eagles, but also the Chiefs. Ironically, the Eagles' victory was arguably the best of the season for the Jets, while Zach Wilson enjoyed the best game of his career against the Chiefs. So he's accused of hitting up the Chiefs, and Hardman is also now accused of leaking his team's game plan while playing for the Jets. Keep this in mind, while playing for the Jets and playing with a one-year contract for $4 million, $3 million of it fully guaranteed of the $3. On top of that, Chad, he refused to play on special teams in Week 4. He admitted to this with Ryan Clark. Zay Jones hurts his ankle on a Wednesday or Thursday of the Chiefs game. Jets are playing the Chiefs. Hardman is currently with the Jets. Special teams coordinator, who doesn't get along with Hardman and Hardman hates him, came to him in pregame and said, hey, I need you to return kicks today. And he said no. Flat out said, no, I'm not going to do that. Not doing it. Because he signed there believing he was going to be the returner, then Jones ended up being the returner. And then he just flat out hates his special teams
Wouldn't do his
coach.
job.
And this was one of the games where his former teammates are straight up accusing him of handing over a game plan to the Eagles and Chiefs. Kansas City was week 4. Philadelphia was week 6. And it's no coincidence about these teams. Kansas City, he knows everyone there. He had won 2 Super Bowls, now 3. And Chad, Philadelphia, practically it's a Georgia Bulldogs roster there, if you think about it. Hardman played for the Bulldogs. Practically Georgia via Philadelphia.
Yeah.
The fact that it didn't help the opposition, that's to me, that doesn't matter.
Does not matter one bit.
Because he in New York, he lasted, of a 1-year contract, he lasted 6 weeks. He was targeted 3 times, which is one more than the number of teams he's accused of leaking game plans to. He had 1 catch for 6 yards within that time frame. And he goes on to win his 3rd Super Bowl ring, and he caught the game-winning touchdown in overtime for Kansas City. He brought this on himself. The league should do more than just review a complaint. If Joe Douglas wants to file that for tampering, send a message. Say this can't happen. Because you want to drop a pass like Kadarius Toney did multiple times this season. Well, hit the bench. But you want to drop offensive plans to the opposition that week because you're disgruntled. You just can't go back on the field like that. And I'm not for collusion, but we've seen it. It's been obvious throughout the years with NFL owners. If the league had any balls, when I say the league, I'm talking about the owners in particular. If you had any balls, you'd make sure that this guy doesn't catch another one. Because as soon as he's pissed off, peace. That's how he treated this. And the integrity part that the NFL wants to push about sports betting and gambling compared to this, if you want to talk integrity, even with gambling aspect of this, you have to send a message that this cannot happen if, in fact, it happened. And it's not even coming from the media or the report with a leak. It is straight up coming from his former teammates on social media or through responses to a podcast where Hardman's on there with Ryan Clark just acting like it's no big deal.
Well, the same way, the same fervor they showed in going after Spygate and Deflategate. I'm talking about Roger Goodell and the league.
Right.
In this, they need to investigate this game plan sharing part of it. It's going to be pretty easy to find out if you reached out to someone with the Chiefs that saying, come get me. The tampering part of it, whatever. They can make their penalties assigned for whatever for doing that. The big part of this, though, is the story you talked about, that players in the Jets believe he was leaking game plans and playbooks to opposition. If that's true, he should get a 2-year minimum suspension from the NFL, effectively ending his career. I don't think it should take NFL owners to collude on that. I think the NFL should rule that he's suspended for 2 years. That's you got to have some of the harshest of penalties for someone who does that. Now, the tampering part, that's also wrong, and the Jets have every right to be pissed, and they should investigate it. And if it's true, and even what he's talking about it, if all that's true, there should be a penalty there also. But if he shared game plans, that's putting people in danger. I don't care what the outcome of the game turned out to be. The integrity part of it, the integrity piece, that's out the window. I think you've got to send a strong message and suspend him for 2+ years.
Think about this.
But you know what I think is going to happen? They're not going to look into it because the league does not want this type of scandal on their hands. I think they want it to go away. And they don't want the Super Bowl hero that scored the winning touchdown to also be the guy that was helping other teams beat the Jets or try to beat the Jets by handing over offensive playbooks.
But they're stressing in Vegas across the board. We can't even have the threat of hurting the integrity of the game.
Well, there's the threat.
But there it is.
Yep.
And by the way, it happened where he's also admitting he refused to play in the game where he's alleged to have handed over the offensive game plan to the Chiefs.